What's going on, everybody? My name is Thomas Miller. I am at Don Thomas Miller on Twitter and most social media sites. If you happen to like and enjoy what you're seeing here today, please give me a follow, comment on the video, share the video. I love that. What I want to talk to you all about today is college football, the sport that so many of us love, so many of us are passionate about, and its future. We ran into a little situation at the beginning of the year, right before the start of the year, where we started getting into that every 5-6 year period where we're seeing a bunch of conference realignment. We're kind of getting into a point where we don't know what the future of college football can actually be. If it is going to be something where you only matter if you're one of 5 or 6 different teams, you only matter if you're in 1 or 2 different conferences. Is that really what we want it to be? Like, there's a ton of history that goes into everything about college football, and it really has been a history of just a few different teams having what would be considered by them great histories. Almost every single school has a conference championship here and there at minimum. But I mean, really, if you just look at the blue chip schools, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, Clemson these days, Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska back in the day, those are really Penn State. There's more, whatever. Don't get on me if I didn't mention your blue chip school, sorry. But, uh, those are the schools that have had history. And so they're kind of looked at differently. We're in a time where we're really, with the playoff the way it is, with the conference realignment, particularly in the SEC, is there going to be a major shift in what we know as college football, or is it just going to continue down this path, make these super conferences that, you know, you have 16 teams in a conference, 8 teams in each division. You might play a team every like 7 or 8 years that's in your conference. Have no idea about them, and with the regional stuff kind of being thrown out as well, it just kind of seems like, is there a way to just change things enough, right? That we still have the game, the sport that we love, everything that we love about college football, but it's changed enough to revolutionize it and create something that's a little different, that maybe levels the playing field, kind of gives lesser teams a chance, and that's something that I kind of nerded out on over this past weekend. When I'm recording it, it's the last day of November 2021. And so the regular season, technical regular season, just ended. We got championship week coming up. I think there's some regular season games, that week as well. But really, what it all kind of started off, and what I'll get into here, I kind of woke up early one morning for my kids were awake, and for some reason I started thinking about the preseason AP poll. And I looked at it. It's just the concept that it's idiotic. We don't need this. They have no idea what they're trying to predict. If you go through and you look at the preseason top 25, is over half the teams are no longer ranked. They're not going to be ranked even if they win a bowl game or whatever. A lot of them aren't going to get to a bowl game. And so like that's kind of what we're judging everything that happens everything that happens throughout the year, based on something that doesn't need to be done. It doesn't need, really, has no part of what actually happens on the field. So let's get started. Here I am. How y'all doing? It's my PowerPoint that I came up with to try to kind of underscore what I'm talking about here. I'm calling it Revolutionizing College Football by Thomas Miller, at Don Thomas Miller on Twitter. So like I was saying, I was looking at these preseason polls after the final regular season games on Saturday, and this is, it's ridiculous. You could try to come up with some of these teams and say, well, this team is the most disappointing team of the year because they were ranked 10th preseason, they end up going 6-6 or whatever, or, you know, Indiana was preseason 17, they ended up going 2-10, 2 wins, 10 losses. So it's kind of like, you know, who had the most disappointing year, but like what this shows and how wrong it is. And even when the college football playoff comes out with their first rankings at the end of October, whatever, how wrong that was compared to what we're looking at right now. It just makes it, that's something that, you know, that we really can get rid of. We don't need an AP or a coach's poll throughout the entire year at all. We can have some sort of poll that's based on like a committee and computers and stuff like that come up with rankings. I'm all for that, but I mean, that's one of the main parts of this, is that we have all these perceptions going into the year, and it's going to make you judge two teams differently. A team that's not ranked in preseason with 2 losses could end up being ranked something, you know, at two losses at the end of the year could end up being ranked something like 18th, you know, in the country. And then there's this other team who had a weaker schedule or whatever, and they have 2 losses, and they're like in 8th, ranked 8th. And what's that based on? It's based on predictions that people don't want to admit they were wrong about, and it all comes from a preseason sort of thing. There's another big thing going on with the conference realignment. Like I said, SEC looking, you know, as they should. They feel that they're the best conference in the nation. You know, it's really hard to argue against it. You know, I'm not going to do that. And, you know, they're forming a super conference. I mean, so like, where is the balance of power? What makes college football great? What makes the college football regular season great? You know, and how can we improve that, or how can we continue to have a great regular season, but then also include some sort of playoff system and some sort of system for the small guys to get their shot as well. You know, the schools in the group of 5 or FCS teams coming up, going from FCS to FBS, things like that. Another thing that we've seen that was a big topic of conversation back in August is the NIL, where athletes can get paid now. And there were a lot of people who wanted to tell you that, well, this is going to open up opportunities for other schools. It's not the case. It's not going to be the case. If you just look at the amount of money, none of this is like officially reported, but what it's rumored to be for people like, you know, who are at Alabama or Ohio State. I mean, if you want to make money, it's not like you're all of a sudden going to go to Arkansas because Walmart and Tyson Foods are there. You're going to still go to Alabama because you're going to make more money, you know? So that's another thing that could just continue to push into this balance of where there's like really 6 teams that matter, and then like 100 and whatever, 125, 129 teams that don't matter. And that's not a system that makes any sense. That doesn't grow this game. I'm not talking about growing more fans, because obviously if you're a fan of college football, you're a fan from when you're a little kid and until you grow up, you know, and a lot of times it comes from your dad, your grandpa, your grandma, your aunts, or whatever. So all I really want to do is just kind of change this a little bit, make it something that's very similar, but at the same time, very different. And the basic model that I go by is the other sport that I love equally, or if not more than college football, and that's soccer. And so really my models kind of come from European club soccer, where we're going to be seeing something as we start getting into this finally, that is similar to each country having their own league in soccer, and then playing in the Champions League, and that's kind of going to be like our playoff. So let's get into this. Let's move on here. How to revolutionize college football. The first thing is to create a college football format that keeps the regular season important, because without a doubt, college football regular season is the best regular season in all of sports. There's nothing comparable. The NFL season is also a short season compared to other major or other professional sports, but you can lose 7 games and still win the Super Bowl. You know, that's what makes college football great from week 0 all the way, you know, to the bowl games, or at least the college football playoff, you know. And then moving on, we want to avoid an SEC breakaway. The SEC almost seems like their in-game intention would be to create like an SEC college football, and then the rest of the teams are in something else, and avoid a system which only a few teams have a chance to win it all. I kind of already touched on that. Going back to what makes it a great regular season is you allegedly can't lose, right? Well, you can lose. You can lose once or twice if you're Alabama or if you're Ohio State. And people are still gonna possibly put you in the playoff, and then also the other part of this last one there was create a universal season structure within the 10 conferences. And I'll get into that in great detail, but basically what it is that even though the SEC, you cannot argue against that, they are the dominant conference in college football right now and have been for quite a long time. But I mean, if you look at the balance of their schedules, they still play only 8 conference games, and we'll do things like schedule New Mexico State the second to last game of the season, while Big Ten and other conferences are playing 9 conference games. And you can say what you want about the SEC top to bottom versus the Big Ten top to bottom, but you can't tell me that having a home game scheduled in against a crap FCS team or a crap Group of 5 team the second to last week in November is somehow harder than going on the road and trying to win at Northwestern or at Indiana or at Illinois or any bottom type Big Ten team. The good teams are still going to do it. They're still going to win those games, but that's not a balance. That's not an equalness. And that's kind of like one of the things that, like, at least in my opinion, that we, college football would need is just something that's more universal. And you'll see that when I get into my conference breakdowns and everything. As I mentioned in the open too, abolish the need for the AP pool and the coaches pool. This is going to be basically a season-long tournament that is going to create a true champion. And then implement promotion regulation into the conferences. That's another soccer thing. I'll get into that, explaining it, but basically there's 5 Power 5 conferences, there's 5 Group of 5 conferences. So each Power 5 is going to be aligned with a regional based Group of 5. I know a lot of you have done it in your NCAA football dynasties and stuff like that. What I'm going to try to do here is put forth something that is possible to implement and make a promotion relegation system within college football. And then lastly is to expand the playoff. The playoff format that I'm going to use is not my original one. I've seen it out there from a lot of different people, but it's just something that at the minimum, is a change for the positive. So getting into college football, it has the greatest regular season in sport, and how to keep it that way, but also change pretty much everything. So what makes the college football regular season great, right? It's some of these games, some of these faces that you see on the screen right now. We all remember Doug Flutie's Hail Mary, don't remember it. We weren't alive, but we've seen the video, the Appalachian State at Michigan, things like that. So what makes the college football regular season so great is that basically the concept and what they have, led us to believe is that every single game matters. You cannot lose one game. Like I've already explained, you can lose games. And the way things are set up, you can schedule whoever the fuck you want in your non-conference schedule, and it don't matter. It doesn't matter, if just because of the reputation of the SEC or the Big Ten, I guess, or the Big 12 in certain years, for sure, you can schedule 3 or 4 terrible teams in your non-conference, beat them all 70-0, and nobody's gonna blink an eye at you. But I mean, if you're like a middle of a road team who all of a sudden is, if you're a Wake Forest and all of a sudden you're 10-0, people want to criticize your non-conference schedule. It's just creating some sort of balance of power. That this concept that it is the greatest regular season, and it does create the most excitement. You feel as excited in week one when your team's playing whoever as you do in the final week. You know, in the NFL, maybe opening weekend you do feel excited, but you have room to lose games in the format that I've created. I think you're still kind of running into the same sort of thing where you have to win your conference championship basically to get into the playoff. So you might be able to lose a game, but it's not like we create something where, like college basketball, for example, that you know you can lose 10 games, and if you made the right adjustments and got the right rotation, maybe you're going to make a big deep run into the tournament, and that's not going to be possible. So we're keeping the regular season great, which is important. And that's why I said these are some of the things that we're going to do to revolutionize college football. All right, so like the first part of it would be conference realignment. And the interesting thing about conference realignment, that anytime it starts happening, you have old school people versus new school people, and that's why in the old school graphic, I threw up that Southwest conference, the old, scandalous conference that was all these Texas schools in Arkansas. And then, the new school, that's a graphic that, during quarantine, during all the time with COVID, people were coming up with these like every single other week about these like just completely regionalizing these FBS schools. And so conference realignment, it's been around since I started watching college football. I can remember Penn State joining the Big Ten, which a lot of people thought was like fucking nuts, the Big 8 expanding to the Big 12. And then, in this century, you've had movement from Nebraska and Colorado. Texas A&M and Missouri took off to the SEC. It's now see teams like West Virginia in the Big 12 because of that. And then, like I said, that a big story in the the preseason for college football this year was Texas and Oklahoma taking off to the SEC. So so to start off the concept of how I want to change college football a little bit, and how I think it can work. Just to get started, we're going to use the current Power 5 conferences, and we're going to use the same 5 conferences that exist right now. I know, while like doing some research for this, I've seen that the WAC has started up again, and they all plan to make the move to FBS at some point within like a decade. So, but I mean, that's too far down the road. Some of this conference realignment allegedly won't start taking place till 2025, but it does kind of sound like that actually will be a lot sooner. And so we're going to use the same Power 5, same group of 5s, with some already in place realignment mixed in with some that I just created. All right, and so let's just get into this right now. So this is just the basic concept of what a season, of what all this will look like. And move my ugly ass face right there. Okay, so all Power 5 conferences will have 14 teams. Starting right off, SEC with this realignment, they have 16. So we're gonna have to find a way to get somebody out, a couple teams out there. So this is the big thing. The regular season will consist of a true round robin within the conference. So that means there's 13 games in a season now, but they'll all be conference games. So you only play teams in your conference, no non-conference games. And I can imagine that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. There's this something about American sports, I guess, where you want to see your team play different teams sometimes or whatever. I don't really know. But I think that this format is a way to create something that moves college football into the future. And at the same time, if you really, really break it down, and I'll kind of get into the non-conference stuff here in a second, what makes college football regular season great is conference games. It's the Michigan Ohio State game. It's the Nebraska Oklahoma or Nebraska Colorado game, or the whatever, the Alabama Georgia game or whatever. This is what makes college football season great. It's not these made for TV opening weekend games versus two teams that are in a preseason top 25 that in it, one of them ends up having 5 losses in the year. It really wasn't a great game, So just continuing on with this, try to get through this as fast as possible, but at the same time be entertaining. Thomas, let's go. So the home and away will alternate year to year as it does now. So yeah, that is kind of already would be, if this was in the real world, would kind of be a no sell for a lot of teams. They want more home games. The big teams want more home games, and they have road games. So obviously one year you would have 6 home games, the next year you would have 7. So that could probably be already some sort of no sell, or something that they want no part of. But this isn't the real life, so we're just going to keep going. Each Power 5 conference is going to have a championship game. So basically, kind of going back to the top, use whatever conference you want. Big Ten, 14 teams in the Big Ten. Every single team, you play every single team one time. Maybe 7 of them at home, 6 of them on the road, 6 at home, 7 on the road. The 2 teams that finish first and second in there, because they're no longer going to be divisions in these conferences, will then play in a conference championship game that could create something where there's whatever it is. Maybe Ohio State lost at Michigan State, but then they get a rematch in a neutral site, and find out who truly is the better team. And that championship game setup is just going to go ahead and use what the Big 12 is currently using. The Big 12 doesn't have divisions. They just play the number 1 team versus the number 2 team. And then also, getting into, the end of that towards the championship game, the winner of each Power 5 conference championship game gets an automatic berth in the playoff. We'll get into the playoff when we get. And you can imagine there's 5 teams right there automatically in. So this non-conference thing, right? So if you take a deep dive and look at what are considered some of the best non-conference rivalries in all of college football, a lot of them have to do with Notre Dame. But Notre Dame is going to be plugged into a conference, and you'll see when I do my conference realignment. So a lot of that will be taken care of. But I mean, really, I just picked some of the games that are allegedly great, and a lot of them they're not even playing anymore. I mean, ever. So you look at Notre Dame breached USC. There was, I guess, in whatever USC's dynasty years, like 2003 or whatever to 2006, whatever that was, before the Alabama dynasty, the Notre Dame USC games were can't miss. It has a ton of history or whatever. I think they still play it. I really can't even tell you. I don't think Notre Dame played USC this year. I know they played Stanford this past week. I think that was their only West Coast team. I mean, they're usually playing Toledo and stuff nowadays. The backyard brawl, that was one from my childhood that I love, but I mean, I can't remember the last time that it was played. I think possibly they played it this year or one of these years. I don't know, but I don't think it's scheduled to be played all the time. Florida versus Florida State. There's another one. When I was a child, this was probably my favorite rivalry. They play at the last game of the year, and it just seemed like every single year it had national championship implications. But I watched this game this weekend. It was, both teams were 5 and 6. It wasn't good. It was good for all the wrong reasons. It was just bad. and so, I mean, I guess, yeah, you're not going to get that game. Sorry. Clemson versus South Carolina. over this summer, I had some contractors up here from South Carolina. I assumed they would all be Clemson fans. They ended up being South Carolina Gamecocks fans, which made me like them more to begin with. But I mean, so you're not going to see that rivalry, and so I'm sure that upsets those guys and you know some people in that state. But I mean, really outside of the state, and just jumping ahead to the Cyhawk game too, Iowa State. I mean, it might be a big deal for a lot of Iowa State fans and most Iowa fans, but I mean, outside of the state, really, I mean, who gives a shit about that game? Are people really gonna miss it? And then the last one just on this list is Georgia Tech versus Georgia. It's the same sort of thing. Like I can't ever remember, you know, when they were both really good. I can't remember too many meaningful games. And Georgia Tech had a nostalgic. I think they have history. Georgia has history as well and have been good for a long time. So I think there's a little something to that. But I mean, really, is anybody gonna miss it outside of Georgia? Moving on. So one of the big things that you always hear about when it comes to FBS schools scheduling FCS teams or even allegedly group of 5 teams that don't have a ton of money in their programs, which is bullshit, by the way. Group of 5, you just look at some of their realigned conferences that are actually in real life, not things that I'm making up. When we get to that, you'll see they clearly have money. But I mean, you always hear that like an FCS school, like when it's Iowa or Iowa State, they play Northern Iowa, and that the money that they make from that one game as it you know, funds their entire athletic program for the entire year, whatever, you know. So okay, like I understand that. So here's just a couple possible solutions of things that you could do, because like I said, this is going to be group of 5 and power 5. There are going to be no non-conference games except for the playoff or, you know, some bowl games, bowl season. So since it is going from 12 regular season games to 13 regular season games, I'm assuming that the season will have to start a week sooner. I think you're going to want to have the conference championship still a couple weeks before Christmas. And then if you're going to have an expanded playoff, you're going to want to start it around Christmas. It'd be the perfect time to start it. So I think whatever that, you know, the last week in Saturday, the kind of the week 0 that we've been seeing the last 3 or 4 years in college football. So possibly, you know, a week or 2 before that, let all FBS teams play a exhibition game against an FCS team, you know, or whatever, some sort of non-conference thing where it's like a NFL preseason game. You know, you have them at, if you, let's use Nebraska as an example. If Nebraska invites, you know, Missouri State or something, some FCS team to come play in Lincoln, you know, this like on August 8th, you know, a couple weeks before the season starts, they're obviously going to sell out that game. They could obviously pay, who would I say, Missouri State, you know, the $1 million or $2 million or whatever they pay, you know, but it's going to be considered a preseason game. It's going to be considered an exhibition game. So it won't go against your win-loss. But I mean, you're still gonna sell out. Most of these stadiums, most of these teams are that way. So I think that could be an example of how to create, you know, that money that allegedly these FCS schools need to survive. Another way to kind of create some non-conference game or look at rivalries that may with realignment or whatever been, you know, thrown to the wayside is that it's still going to keep bowl games in there for the teams who get into who do not get into the playoff, obviously. See, there could be some sort of pacts where like I used Iowa and Nebraska agree to play in a bowl game if neither reach the playoff. And so like basically every year, as I said, neither of us ever get into that. So like so that could be something where it'd be like, okay, Georgia Tech, Georgia, or whatever, Clemson, South Carolina, you know, Florida State. If neither one of us makes it into the playoff, and then okay, you know, our bowl game is gonna be a game between each other. You know, and that will go on. Bowl games go on your win-loss record overall and everything. So I mean, it will still be on record. It could be something where Iowa State plays every single bowl game. um, and so I mean, so the rivalry goes on or whatever. The other idea that I had that I think kind of came about the start of the 2020 season with COVID and everything like that is that instead of just playing like a practice game or an intramural, like whatever, most schools do have a scrimmage type game. Some schools though just do like in open media practice, like Lee Ferentz does that, which is fucking boring as shit. Even if it was an actual scrimmage game with like a black and gold team, I would have no desire to watch it. But why can't we just have some of these exhibitions? Why can't UNI and Iowa State play, and then Iowa plays like Southern Illinois or something? Why? So like, why can't that happen in spring? Obviously, that's another way. You're gonna create TV revenue, out your ass. I mean, spring practices like didn't finish up before the heart of March Madness. I mean, it would be perfect. It would be really great to see. And there's really no reason like for health concerns or travel concerns or money or whatever, if we're being honest about these universities. Some people get hurt in these practices too. So I mean, and nobody says if it's an exhibition game that you got to play your surefire, all-American quarterback for the whole game. You just play him enough, and you lose or whatever. I think college football has enough heart, and the stadiums would be, full enough that it wouldn't really feel like a practice game. I mean, there would be a lot of excitement in the game still. So I mean, that's another possibility. More games. I love more games. Everybody wants more games. So moving on. So this is the current Power 5 conference setup. My stupid face in the way again. This is after realignment. I mentioned that I think everything in this realignment isn't supposed to start until 2025 football season, but there's plenty of talk that it will actually happen before that, and possibly as soon as next year, which would be pretty cool, I guess. And so you see that, and we all heard about the Big Ten, Pac-12, ACC alliance. Nothing's really came of the alliance so far. All the alliance has really done was just kind of an agreement to stop pillaging each other's conferences for a minute and let everybody chill out and at least get through, the season before they start doing that again. I think that's all that's really come of that. The SEC did not drop any teams, but they did add Oklahoma and Texas, as I mentioned. Big 12 was the conference that really had a ton of work to do. They were looking at a really bad situation with only 8 members and none of them really traditional powers at all. So they added BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston. So you can now see kind of where, if we get into where I'm doing realignment, that I don't necessarily have to consider any sort of regional thing, because looking at the Big Ten, it goes, the Big Ten stretches all the way from Lincoln, Nebraska at the moment to Piscataway, New Jersey, and Maryland. And the Big 12, you're looking at Utah, Utah all the way over to West Virginia, and everything in between. One thing that I did mention is that the way that my setup is that every conference is going to have 14 teams. And so obviously there's going to be some moving and shaking within this. One of the things I didn't want to do, I tried not to do, but I did do it with one team, is a team that BYU, who just committed the Big 12, or Oklahoma and Texas. I didn't want to move them right back. I don't know why. It just seems like, okay, let this be in place. But I did, and you'll see I ended up moving BYU. Okay, so then let's just ask the question, how to get 5 Power 5 team conferences with 14 teams in each. And that's going to be done by moving around some Power 5 teams and pillaging and poaching some group of 5, you know, and to just let everybody see what with realignment, the group of 5 and independents currently look like at this moment here in November 2021. Still have the 4 independents at this moment. The American and Sun Belt have made themselves stronger. Conference USA was a conference that was completely pillaged. So you see them actually adding 2 FCS teams. And I think those moves actually happen to start of next football season. And those FCS teams are Jacksonville State and Sam Houston State, who is one of the traditional powers in FCS. The Sun Belt also added another one in James Madison. So these group of 5s are going to be used as the second tier conferences for the Power 5 conferences. But in my system too, they're also going to have a shot at getting a national championship every single year, no matter if they're promoted or if they're still in these lower divisions, which, you know, group of 5, call it what it is, it's the lower tier. And so that's just a quick look at how they stand now. Going into it, this is where I'm going to move around the Power 5 conferences to get to 14 teams in each one. And so starting off, you know, we have 16 in the SEC. The only school that I am going to immediately relegate in the system. I didn't really want to do it. It doesn't seem fair, but that is going to be Vanderbilt. They are a great educational institution. It's the Harvard of the South or whatever it's called. And they bring a lot to the SEC and other sports, women's basketball, baseball. They've had some nice runs in college, men's basketball as well. I think there were a couple years here, maybe about 10 years ago, where they were ranked in football, but I mean, they're by far the worst Power 5 team at this moment. They have, I'm sure, better histories than some of the other Power 5 teams, but at the moment, they're by far the worst. So we are going to go ahead and just eliminate Vandy from the SEC. They're going to be dropped down to a group of 5, which I'll get to when I get to. The next move that I'm going to do, I did mention that I do not want to just drop Oklahoma and Texas back into the Big 12, even though that, you know, for traditional matchups and power, it actually makes a lot more sense. What I did end up doing was moving Missouri here back into the Big 12. And that's going to kind of make a lot more sense when you start looking at other realignment things that I've done. So now we got the SEC. We do have them at 14 teams. So they're set where they need to be set. We're still looking at the Pac-12 with 12. Big 12 at this point in the realignment has 13. So my next move was something I said I was going to try to avoid. But when you see BYU and Colorado swapping places, BYU going out to the Pac-12 and Colorado going to the Big 12, you can kind of imagine who's going to be my 14th Big 12 team. And so without further ado, I love having Nebraska as an Iowa fan. I love having Nebraska as a rival, especially since we beat them every single year. I mean, you can just pencil it in. Iowa's going to be Nebraska. So I'll be sad to see that automatic win go off Iowa's schedule every single year. But if you're bringing in Colorado, Missouri back into a Big 12, along with Kansas State, Iowa State, you know, Nebraska being there makes a lot of sense historically. And then it kind of does create, you know, with the exception of UCF, a team in Florida, I guess. But I mean, when you start getting into like maybe a 5th or 6th year of promotion relegation, I don't think, you know, regional things are really going to matter at all to begin with. So the the major independent that we need to talk about, of course, is Notre Dame. Notre Dame has ACC ties. I think the COVID year they played in the ACC. Every other sport that they play in, they are in the ACC. But just my thinking just is that Notre Dame is in Indiana. There's already 2 schools in Indiana in the Big Ten. Some of the traditional rivals of Notre Dame include Michigan, Michigan State. You can imagine how exciting a Notre Dame Ohio State game is going to be every year, how much revenue it would bring in, and then just dropping any random team from the ACC out. It doesn't make a ton of sense for just the fact that you end up having to move a bunch of teams around. You start moving some of these teams out. And just kind of the ACC can just kind of keep intact. You know, it is what it is. They love basketball there. Clemson had their run. Maybe it's over. Maybe it's not. Maybe they'll be back. It's not a great football conference at this moment. But I mean, so I really didn't want to play around with the ACC too much. So I'm slipping Notre Dame into the Big Ten. And so we're set on 4 of the 5. The Pac-12. What I have for the Pac-12 is they're going to go down to the 5. Mountain West hasn't had any movement at all in this latest realignment. But I'm just basically going to take one traditional West Coast power in Boise State and throw them in there. And then my 14th team, just kind of creating like a regional rival makes sense for me. So the 14th team in the Pac-12 is going to be Utah State. They're not a bad team in any sport, and they're not bad in football. They're pretty good at football. So slide them into the Pac-12. So this is what it looks like here. With my conference realignment, getting all 5 Power 5 conferences to 14 teams, you can kind of take a look there. You can just imagine sort of the system that we talked about that has a true round robin where, Michigan is going to play every single team in this conference. And, what could be their record if you just look at the 2021 Michigan team who's going to represent the Big Ten East here in the Big Ten Championship? What would be their record if they had to play all 13 of these teams? They're currently 11-1. I mean, would it be similar? Would it be 12-1? Would, maybe having to go on the road somewhere where, they're not necessarily used to going, or a game against Notre Dame, maybe they would have a couple losses. Maybe they'd have 3 losses, I think what you start to see when you look at this is how exciting this regular season would actually be. We're talking week 1. You're starting to see it in every single conference now where week 1, they're opening with some conference games. Some teams they still open with a MAC team or an FCS team or whatever. But just speaking on, the region that I'm in, the Big Ten this year, Iowa played Indiana week 1, and Indiana was a preseason, top 20 team, and it was nerve-wracking, but I really did. I liked it. I didn't know how I felt about it. Kind of wanted to ease in with some easy victories and see how things go. But I mean, really, it was exciting and it's good. Nebraska played Illinois. I think Penn State and Wisconsin was week 1. Ohio State, Minnesota. I mean, so teams can get used to it. It's just going to be what it's going to be. All 13 games are going to be a tough game, in all 5 of these conferences. It's going to be a conference game. And that's what that's what the regular season is going to look like. I'm excited just imagining it. I hope, you're still with me on this video, that you're in the same boat. I mean, this looks good. So we got to finish up getting all the conferences set before we started talking about promotion relegation, and also some playoff, expanded playoff, right? So we have the 4 independents. Notre Dame's gone. We sent Boise State up to the Pac-12. We sent Utah State up to the Pac-12. Got Vandy down here. Conference USA has already kind of been leaked to the current independents, UMass and UConn. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw them right in there. I do have then Army Okay, one non-conference thing that I did want to bring up that I think there's a certain part of the country that would be very upset if it went away is the service academy games. So my answer for that, I'm just going to throw all three service academies into the Conference USA and just leave it at that. Moving Navy from the American over to the Conference USA. Army and Independent, by the way, right now, they were at one point members of the Conference USA, I believe, or maybe it was American. It doesn't really work out for them. And since but you know, in my imaginary football thing here, you know, they're back in the Conference USA, whatever. And then since regional stuff doesn't really make sense, I'm gonna go ahead and throw Air Force over there at Conference USA. Uh, looking at the American, kind of contradicting exactly what I just said about regional stuff not making sense. You can kind of see that all the other American teams are just basically, especially removing Navy from there, they're kind of in that same sort of belt. So I took Temple out of there and I threw them over in the MAC. The MAC I'm gonna have being the second tier of the Big Ten. So a Philadelphia kind of vibe kind of goes right along with Maryland, Rutgers, Penn State, in that part of the eastern part of the Big Ten. From the Sun Belt, I'm taking Texas State out of the Sun Belt and throwing them into the Mountain West. Just basically just looking at this, you know, contradicting again what I'm saying, like in a regional sense, this looks like an SEC light. It looks like a 2-dot SEC, you know, with the exception of Texas, even though the SEC currently has Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M in there. So, you know, maybe it doesn't make a ton of sense, but that's just the way it's going to be. My next move is throwing Vandy into the Americans. So you can see we have quite a few spots that still need to be filled. There's just not teams to fill it to get to group of five conferences with 14 members, right? So we got to start talking about possible FCS teams that are going to make the jump to the FBS. And there are some sort of like, I believe there are like stadium requirements and maybe financial or entrance educationally to make this jump, but I'm not 100% sure what they are. So really what I'm just looking at are the teams that have made the jump, are going to make the jump 2022 in real life, and then kind of using that sort of a basis, I guess, to you know, pick the FCS teams that are going to move up. And so to starting off the teams that I'm going to use, North Dakota State, they've been one of the three major powers in the FCS for the last 10, 12 years. South Dakota State, I don't know if they have any desire to move up, but they have been very good. And the thing about South Dakota State is their success against FBS. That's one of the reasons that I picked them. When I was looking around at the possible teams in real life that are going to make the jump, Kennesaw State came up. I believe they're in Tennessee somewhere. I really should have double checked that, but I didn't. I forgot. And they've only been playing FCS football for like 7 years, 6 or 7 years. It was their 6th or 7th season this year, but it sounds like they want to make that jump. Jackson State, you see Deion Sanders there, the head coach. You know, bringing in all these 4-star guys, having better recruiting classes than, you know, half of the Big Ten, half of the Big 12. So, I mean, he's been kind of rumored to some of the available head coaching jobs in FBS right now, but I don't think he's going to go anywhere. And in, you know, my simulation world, I got Jackson State moving up. Another team that has had a ton of success, Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington is another one of the teams that, you know, they beat an FBS team every single year. They have no fear of scheduling anybody. You know, I think I could definitely see them making some sort of jump into the FBS. The next team, Villanova, obviously, you know, great basketball tradition, big school, big enrollment, Philadelphia area. It makes a lot of sense. They're pretty good at football again this year. They're still alive in the FCS tournament. And then really the last team, just kind of just a personal choice, I guess. I picked University of South Dakota. I think in recent history, it was the first time I remember them even making the FCS tournament this year. They beat South Dakota State on a Hail Mary. I'm pretty sure their little mini dome up there in Vermilion probably wouldn't meet FBS requirements if there are some, but I don't care. I want South Dakota in this. So now I moved those teams over here. So we're gonna start filling out the conferences. You see how we have it. Uh, let's just start with the Mountain West. They're the most depleted. They needed to fill 4 spots to get to 14. I only had them at 10 members, and put North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Eastern Washington, and USD, South Dakota, over there. Next, Jackson State, right there in SEC country. And as I believe I have mentioned, Sunbelt is going to be the second tier of the SEC. Kennesaw State, because of their location, into the America. And Villanova is going to head over to the MAC. The MAC, so now the MAC, you got teams in Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, and now Pennsylvania as well. And so there you kind of see the group of 5 teams, kind of at the moment, there's an obvious really, really good one in the Sun Belt. The American definitely has, taken hits with losing like Cincinnati and Houston, who were in their championship game this weekend. They're both going to go to the Big 12, but and then Conference USA really looks like a weak option at this point. But I mean, it gives all these teams, an incentive. Conference USA is going to be bleeding into the Big 12. So, I mean, that would give incentive to all these teams to spend a ton of money to get to a point where they could possibly have, even if it's just 1 year. You see it all the time in soccer where some small club gets promoted and they're there for 1 year and they go back. You never really hear from them again. But I mean, the money that they would make with TV revenue and all this and that, that's kind of the competitiveness that you create when we get into promotion relegation. Just to kind of wrap up the group of 5 stuff, group of 5 conferences play same format as Power 5, no conference, no non-conference games, same sort of thing. There's a 14, so they're gonna play 13 games, et cetera, et cetera. Same conference championship setup, where the number 1 team plays a number 2 team in the conference championship at a neutral site. And the team that wins the conference championship game gets the auto qualifier into the playoff. And see, that kind of where it kind of complicates things, where we start looking at somebody from the Conference USA that I just talked about being absolute shit, being in the playoff over, a possible 3rd place SEC team or something like that. But I mean, really, this system is about getting everybody to a level that is, that does have, kind of a shot at the beginning of the year for a national championship, and every team has, the possibility to win their conference. Every team has literally 1 through 140 technically have a shot to get into the national championship game and win the national championship game. And the last thing about the group of 5 championship game is that winner, that game is going to be used as the promotion playoff as well. So not only do you get into the playoff, but the next year you'll be playing in the higher conference, the Power 5 conference, which kind of leads me into the next thing, which is, what is promotion relegation? So promotion relegation is used in soccer. Almost every single soccer league in the world, except for the MLS, which is our league in the US, uses it. And it's used to promote competitive games. It gives smaller teams a shot at the big time, and it prevents tanking. You don't see it necessarily so much in college football, but you can see it in NBA and NFL, where teams will tank so they get a better draft position or whatever. This is going to require, some lower teams or teams that have a bad year to not just quit, not just have their entire squad enter a transfer portal, all their good guys stop playing, you know, because they're going to need them. They possibly could be playing in a relegation playoff that we'll talk about here. And so how will it work in college football? And I kind of already gotten into that. Promotion relegation college football will be each Power 5 conference will be aligned with a group of 5 conference that will be considered a second tier or second division of the Power 5 conference. And I used what Bundesliga and I think at least a couple other Europeans. I'm gonna call them the two dots. So it's gonna be this will be the alignment. The Big Ten and the MAC will be together. So the MAC will be now known as two dot Big Ten, Pac-12 with the Mountain West, ACC with the American, Big 12 with Conference USA, and then obviously SEC with the Sun Belt. In Power 5 conferences, the two bottom finishing teams will be put into a relegation playoff. The relegation playoff games will be held the Thursday and Friday before the conference championship game at the same site. So in Big Ten, it's Indianapolis. So you can imagine, you know, a scenario where Northwestern has to play Indiana this year, we'll say, in a relegation playoff the Friday night before the Big Ten championship game Saturday night. I mean, these are going to be must-see games. These are must-see games. You know, these universities aren't going to want to be relegated. They're not going to want to go down to the MAC and get off TV or be on ESPN Plus instead of being on the Big Ten Network at minimum every single week. You know, so these games will be intense. I love that. I love that idea. I love my own idea. The loser relegation game will be relegated. So obviously, to the corresponding second tier conference for the next season. So I use Northwestern and Indiana. If Northwestern beats Indiana, Indiana would play the next season in the MAC. And, you know, maybe competitiveness or whatever with guys on their squad, maybe they win the MAC, you know, but that's just part of it. That's just going to be part of it. Maybe they don't win the MAC. I mean, who's to say, you know, half the teams in the Big Ten are better than, you know, half of the teams in the MAC. We don't have any idea, to be honest. And then the Group of 5 championship games will serve as a promotion playoff, which I already mentioned, the winner being awarded the relegated team spot in the corresponding conference next season. So in that example, I believe the MAC championship is Northern Illinois versus Kent State. Kent State wins that game. And then in my scenario, Indiana lost. So Kent State would be playing the next season in the Big Ten, 2022 season in the Big Ten, Indiana in the MAC. I have some more examples here. So Illinois and Northwestern finish. Illinois finishes 0-13. Northwestern finishes 2-11. The Big Ten. So now they play each other with the loser going to the MAC that next season. And I had Ball State winning the MAC championship, so they'll now play in the Big Ten. Another example is going to be Nevada wins the Mountain West and Arizona is relegated. So next season, Nevada's in the Pac-12, while Arizona will be playing ball in the Mountain West Conference. In SEC example, Alabama goes 0-13 and loses 55-10 in the relegation playoff versus 1-12 South Carolina. Alabama must play the following season in the Sun Belt. And congrats to Jackson State on the promotion to the SEC. Good luck next year, Jackson State Jaguars? I don't know, whatever their name. And then, you know, SEC, I mean, ACC, Big 12, same thing, blah, blah, blah. All right, so then we get into the playoff. How will the expanded playoff work? Yeah, it took me a long time to get here. And this is actually going to be probably the shortest part of it because this isn't my idea. This is my original idea. I've seen this out there a million times, but I like it. And the only thing I was kind of torn against was if I wanted to use 2 wildcard spots or 4 wildcard spots. I ended up going with 2. And it seems it really has me torn. And if you guys do watch this and you do want to comment on what you think between a 14-team playoff where only 2 teams get a bye or a 12-team playoff where we still have kind of that top 4 where a committee can choose the top 4 who's deserving to get a bye, automatic bye to the quarterfinals. Let me know what you think. But I just kind of decided on 12 just because you really don't think, the third and fourth best non-conference champion in this setup would really have a chance to win the playoff to begin with. And by the way, with an expanded playoff, you still might see every single year in the Final Four, Alabama versus Clemson, Ohio State versus Oklahoma, or whatever, Georgia, whatever. You know what I mean? So it could just always end up being the same thing. But yeah, that is why I decided to do the just the 2 wild cards and include a Conference USA champion in the playoff. They'll obviously be the 12th seed or whatever, and they'll probably get housed by whoever the fifth seed is. But that's just the way it is, and so it's a 12-team playoff. Top four teams are seeded, and they get a bye to the quarterfinal, the second round. All Power 5 conference champs plus all Group 5 conference champs plus 2 wildcard teams. I already went over that. And I do have in here as well that the wildcards can be higher than the 6th seed. So they could and probably will still host games. I don't think you're going to see neutral sites. I think you kind of look at something maybe in the quarterfinals, you start seeing a neutral site sort of games. But I think at least that first round, I think you probably play home games. Your team is the 5th seed. You'll be hosting whoever, Florida International. Congratulations, Florida International. Go lose to Georgia 66-0 or something, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, that's just basically the playoff system. We've seen it out there, seen modules for it, seen brackets for it, and it makes sense. I mean, because honestly, with the balance of power the way it is right now, yeah, I mean, there really is just a couple of teams that you could see winning the national championship this season, but hopefully with all of this, it kind of creates something that does become more inclusive for teams. And who knows, in a 12-team playoff, you could end up seeing an 11 seed winning it all or something. And then you got that old school versus new school debate once again, going on, like, well, they didn't beat a ranked team the entire year, but they didn't beat any good teams. We're not gonna do rankings anymore. Forgot about that. So, are they really deserving of the championship? And why the fuck not? I don't know. I mean, so that's the playoff, and if you guys like this video or whatever, after the conference championship games, I guess we could kind of like possibly look at what the playoff would look like if this was intact. I know that with the realignment, none of it's in place yet, but I mean, it is what it is, right? So yeah, I mean, that's all I got for everyone. You did stick around to the end, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Don Thomas Miller. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked it. Sorry if I talk too much. Let me know what you think. Comment on this, share it. Let me know. Thank you. Goodbye.